Welcome to the webinar for MSP Contacts. I'm Tom Ryan with Provider Outreach and Education, and I'll be your presenter today. Today, I'm joined by Leanne from my team. She is going to help with anything in the chat, going to put some links out there for you guys, things like that, especially a couple of the questions will have links that go with them, so I want to be aware of that. Let's talk a little bit about today's webinar. First, if you would like to download the presentation for this webinar, please go to our Training Center webpage. You're going to go to the live events portion, and in the live events portion, you're able to download. You just have to find today's webinar. Now, also with the live events portion, please remember that it does have upcoming events. We will be doing more Medicare Secondary Payer throughout the year. Typically, we average one a month, and that's because this is one of our top denials. Once we do these, they will be recorded. As I just said, we're recording this presentation. We will post this as an encore presentation. It will be posted for approximately 60 to 90 days with the material available, but that's in a separate area of the training center, and it's the encore presentations area. For this webinar, if you have questions and comments, please put them into chat. I will respond at multiple points. I'll stop, give you guys the opportunity to ask questions. I'm also going to look at the pre-submitted questions, and we'll address those as we go through. So if you have questions, or if I did not answer the pre-submitted question in a way that will help you, you may need some clarification, whatever you need there, put that back into chat as well. Last, I want to remind you that after this event, we are going to ask for your feedback. It's really important that you provide this feedback. You can grade WPS and kind of help us understand how we're doing as an overall MAC, but then you get to look at the education. I don't know what you need from me, and I can't do better if I don't know what that is. Also, I don't know what you like. Hey, it's awesome if you guys like something and we want to hear that. So we're going to give you a couple opportunities to do that. There will be a link put into the chat, and we'll talk more about that. We're also going to go ahead and give you a couple of opportunities at the end to talk about that. Want to remind everyone that this education is for informational purposes only. We do look at it. We do try to guarantee that it stays current. I did check this education this morning, went through as much as I could. Couple of things to keep in mind: because Medicare does change, the information can change as well. That makes sense, but you want to go to the CMS website for the most current rules, regulations, coverage, all of that stuff. Somebody did ask a question about the WPS website, in particular the question and answer document that's out there. That is guidance only, and it is dated. So the information was accurate at the time that that guidance was put out there, and it is a dated document. Remember, that dated document indicates when it was last looked at and updated. So again, go to the CMS website, always for the most current information. I will say too, if you do, again, have questions come in, things viewed, whatever, please put that back into the chat. We want to help you, but I don't necessarily know what you're looking for. And especially if I did answer your question or felt like I answered your question, but I missed the mark for you, please put that back into chat for me. What are we going to look at today? Well, first of all, our objective is to learn which Medicare Secondary Payer contact performs which function. This will then allow you to contract the proper party, hopefully saving time and money. If you're going through the hoops and you've contacted 6 or 7 different parties and you're not sure which one does what and you're not getting the answers you need, this is not helpful for providers. So we want to try to get you to the right place at the right time, and that is the right contractor or the right entity that you need. So to do that, we will have an MSP overview. We'll talk about the contractors. Who are they? We're going to introduce them and what their functions are. And then I'll show you a few resources. I will tell you that typically the resources are worked throughout the presentation. So when we get to those slides, you may see where I start kind of skipping through the slides because we've already talked about that resource or we've already looked at something available there. All right, let's go ahead and start with the MSP overview. So with the MSP overview, it's Medicare Secondary Payer. Now, interestingly enough, we did have some people, I had 3 questions submitted that were very specific to like just general information on Medicare Secondary Payer. So hopefully during this overview, I'll get to those questions and again, respond back if I don't. So I want to remind you that while this is just a kind of shortened version, we do have a full course out there that is available, and it's on the Medicare Secondary Payer playlist on our YouTube channel. And that course goes much more in depth than I'm going to. Again, this is just an overview. So first, what is MSP? Well, it is health coverage that must consider a claim before Medicare. Now, the first thing I want you to look at, and the reason I put the verbiage in here that I did, is that word consider. They do not always have to pay. While the name indicates that Medicare as a secondary payer, the primary payer doesn't have to pay. It could be outside their benefit program. They could apply it to deductible. They could have not had an authorization, something like that. So to answer your question, no, the primary payer doesn't have to pay a claim. They do have to consider the claim. So when they consider the claim, they can do a variety of different things. Why do we use the term payer versus insurance? And this is interesting for some people, and this is one of the questions that was asked. And the reason that we use the term payer versus insurance, while primary payers can be an insurance, they can also be an entity such as a store for liability. And so if you fall, for instance, at a store and that store does not have liability insurance, they could still be held liable. They're a primary payer. So it's not always an insurance, okay? It could be someone else or something else. So that's why, while you typically hear the word insurance, it's why Medicare uses the term payer. Medicare does break our payers into two categories. One is group health plans and the other is non-group health plans. So let's briefly describe these two categories for you. First, group health plan is an employment-related insurance coverage. That makes sense. So when we talk about this is your employer-based coverage from your job. So who has to be employed, or who do you need to fall under? In other words, who, when the patient comes to you, should this be under? Well, it could be themselves. They can actually still be working and have insurance. Could be under their spouse, could be under a legal guardian or a parent. And each one of those defines into certain categories, and we're going to find out a little bit more about those group health plan categories in just a second here. But remember that when we look at the group health plan, it also is dependent upon the number of people on that group health plan. So for the most part, people will be eligible and Medicare will be primary. But let's talk a little bit about some of the caveats that go with this. So first of all, under group health plan, Medicare uses the way in which a patient is deemed eligible for Medicare to determine primary coverage as well. So if a person is under a group health plan and that group health plan has 20 or more employees, then we look to find out if they're eligible due to age or disability. If it's age, then that group health plan is primary. If they're eligible for disability, that group health plan is not primary, because then it goes into the large group health plan category, and that is 100 or more. So for Medicare eligibility, while you're eligible under potentially a spouse for the other insurance, Medicare eligibility is what we're looking at here, and it's age or disability. There is a third type of eligibility with Medicare, and it's called end-stage renal disease. This particular eligibility is under a different section of the Social Security Act, which is why it has some different criteria. With this one, you still have to be eligible for a group health plan under one of those people, but it uses a 30-month coordination period. It does not say 20 people. It doesn't say 100 people. It doesn't say anything like that. It says it's 30 months coordination. During the first 30 months of end-stage renal disease eligibility, the other plan is primary, Medicare is secondary, but once 30 months passes, then Medicare becomes primary. So hopefully that got you enough information to answer those questions related to that. If not, please put that back into chat and we'll keep moving forward here. As I said, the second category is called non-group health plans. And these are things like liability, no faults, workers' compensation, and federal black lung. Those are the four basic types within that. Remember, liability and no fault sometimes go back and forth, and it really depends on the state. A car insurance is a great example. We have some states that say, no, this is a no fault. We have other states that say, no, this is a liability. So it's really dependent upon that. Same thing with workers' compensation. This type of insurance is based on what the state considers an accident, illness, or injury caused by work. So you may get sick at work, but it might not be caused by work. That also happens. So when we look at workers' compensation, we do have to consider all of those types of laws. When we look at non-group health plans, these are diagnosis-driven primary payers. So unlike group health plans, which are not diagnosis driven, they're either primary or they're not, a non-group health plan is diagnosis driven. And that diagnosis is set by the Benefit Coordination and Recovery Center, or BCRC, in the Coordination of Benefits System, or COB. And it's a like or similar diagnosis as well as exact diagnosis match. And that's just important to understand, I think, in general, when we talk about anything related to MSP. It doesn't say it has to be this exact ICD-10 code. It says, what if it's within this family? Then it will also hit for it. So exact or like. So when we look at non-group health plans, we know that they are diagnosis driven. If a claim is not related, different diagnosis, it's not related to an accident, illness, injury, or anything like that, then Medicare is actually primary and you don't need to bill the MSP or the other insurance. However, sometimes you're unlucky enough where in the Part B world, which is the 1500 or you 837P world, you do have to file an appeal to get this paid. Other times, if you're a UBO4 biller or 837I biller, you may be able to file with condition codes or certain coding on the claim to get it paid to tell us it's unrelated. So we do know that that does happen because it's not always the correct way that we know. All right. A common question that actually came in a couple of different times here was, how do we get Medicare to waive timely filing when the primary insurance did not pay on time? And where is the resource for that? First, within the timely filing guidelines, MSP is not listed as a waiver. So you do need to file these claims within 1 year. That 1 year is from the date of service for an outpatient service or the date of discharge from an inpatient service. That is regardless of whether or not the primary has made a decision. Sometimes you actually file it knowing it's going to deny. You know it's going to deny, you know it's going to sit there. That gives us as the contractor and you time to work with it to get it reopened after a decision is finally made. Okay, so that's all part of that process. So to answer the question, no, timely filing is not waived for a primary payer. File it, let it deny, work with it later once everything is put in place. All right. Another question that was asked is who they contact if they have a situation where there is no Medicare liability. Well, I'm not really sure what kind of contact you were looking for on this one, so I'll answer this as best I can. But I want to let you know that if there is no Medicare liability, do you have to file a claim? There are two different scenarios that go with this. One, inpatient claims, yes, you must file them. Why? It's the benefit tracking days. It is still part of the Medicare system. You have to file it. Now, this could be a no pay claim or a variety of other situations, but that's an inpatient claim. Outpatient claim. If the patient has deductible, please file it. This is an unmet deductible for an outpatient service for that year. We want to make sure it gets filed because we can give them credit for that deductible without them having to pay it. Second, I will tell you that in an outpatient claim, we will encourage you to always bill Medicare, even if there is no patient liability after the primary pays or whatever is happening there. Here's the situation that commonly happens with this type of claim. One, we hear, hey, the primary took their payment back, or hey, they're not considering it. They changed their mind. The patient really didn't have that coverage, but it's over a year later. Well, according to CMS, you are responsible for those claims because you should have determined that appropriately right away. So please make sure that you file those immediately, just like you would any other claim. Now, if you say, hey, I got the decision, I don't know what to do with this, we're going to file it. Great, it didn't do anything. It just gives the patient saying, hey, they don't owe anything. That's okay too, right? We know that. However, then if it does happen to come back, you're already covered. So that's my basic overview information. Again, trying to keep those questions answered. I did get one in the pre-submitted that I didn't work into the slides yet, so we're going to answer that. Then what we're going to do is go back to the actual chat, and I'm going to see if there's any questions in chat. So the question that we have that was pre-submitted, if the patient is unable to answer the MSP questions, what do you do? Let me first of all explain. MSP questions are required by CMS because it's the provider's responsibility to determine who is primary. That makes sense. Hopefully that part makes sense. However, are there times when you pick the patient up on the side of the road as an ambulance company and they're obviously not going to be able to answer those questions because they're not even conscious? Or are there times when the patient comes in and they are not coherent, there's nothing going on, something is causing them to have an episode or an emergency situation? Sure, there are. We all know that that happens. So there's a couple of different things you want to do. First, if the patient's unable to answer their questions, ask a bystander. Is their spouse with them? Is someone else with them, a friend, a neighbor, something? Two, please check our system. Now, our system is the portal, which is actually the SecureNet access portal on our website. We'll talk more about that in a few moments. You can also check the direct data entry or DDE system if you bill in a UB04 or an 837I. And you can also do the HIPAA standard transactions, 270, 271. This is done through us as a contractor as well. We'll get you some more information. But what you really do need to do is document that the patient was unable to answer and why. Not just that they were unable to answer. We've seen that not work to the provider's advantage. Tell us why, help us understand. And then because they were unable to answer, we did the following. We checked the system. Yep, it looks good. We didn't see anything, so we built it. That makes sense. Now you've done what you could do to get the answer, and it is what it is. So hopefully that makes sense to everyone. Leanne, did we have any questions in the chat?
Tom, we did not have any questions come in through the chat.
All right, next we're going to move on to the bigger meat of this topic, and that's who to contact, because that is one of the areas that people continue to struggle with. And I want to let you know that when we're in this section, I will tell you, the patient does not contact the same people always as you as a provider representative will. They can be very different from time to time. So I want to make sure you're aware of when you contact, but also who you refer your patients to. Because if you refer your patients to us as your Medicare administrative contractor, we can't help them. So let's just be kind of aware of that. So let's talk a little bit about some of these different contractors, just kind of general, and then I'll get into the details of it. First, you already heard me mention one, and that's the MAC, the Medicare Administrative Contractor, your claims processor. You've heard me mention this one as well, the Benefit Coordination and Recovery Center, also known as the BCRC. Their job is to, hey, keep those records current and up to date, but they do some recovery work, and we'll talk more about that. There's also the Commercial Repayment Center, or CRC. We'll talk about the CRC. And last is 1-800-MEDICARE. The 1-800-MEDICARE is the patient contact. Now, the patient can contact a couple of other entities, such as the BCRC as well. So let's go through these specifically and really target who should be contacted for what. So first, Medicare MSP contractors, the MACs. The MACs. Sorry, I forgot to advance my slide there. The MACs. These are your claims processings and related functions. This means that we work with the provider community. So if there's an overpayment from the provider, it's our job as a MAC to take it back. So contact the MAC that's asking you that. Also, if you have a question as to how your claim processed or why it processed in a certain manner, that is claims processing, and the MAC is the only one able to answer that. So if you have not gone out and looked at it, or you don't understand, especially if you don't understand, please contact the person that processed it or the company that processed it. In this case, if you happen to be in Iowa, Kansas, Missouri, Nebraska, Indiana, Michigan, or any of our other providers across the nation, you would contact WPS. There are a variety of other MACs, but I do want to give you a caution, and we do have this issue coming up. One of the questions that was asked is, who do you contact regarding railroad Medicare? That is Palmetto Government Benefits Administrator. It is not WPS. We do not handle anything related to that type of Medicare coverage. It's a legal separate contract, so you need to contact them. If you're looking for a list of the MACs, you want to make sure you get to the right one, because there's also home health and hospice that is a separate MAC, and durable medical equipment that is a separate MAC. You will want to use the CMS website to find that. This is going to be available to you. I did have Leanne put a link in there, but because I did have a question on it and I think someone was struggling with this, I'm going to show you the super easiest way I know you can do this. One, go to the cms.gov website. Simply type Mac in the search feature, and it will bring you to what is a Mac websites. I like what is a Mac if you're looking for basic information, but I do like the website with secure access because then you say, oh, I want a certain type of Mac. Well, do I want one of the specialty Macs? Again, DME, Railroad, all of those are considered specialty. Otherwise, you can say I want WPS just as an example. We'll bring it to our website. If you're looking down further, you can go by state. Nebraska is here. Here's one of our states, and it'll tell you, here's the websites, here's your portals, here's all this different information. If you don't find this helpful and you want to go a little bit more in general and you want to see, you can use the review contractor directory. You could also use what is a Mac. Now, these all will take you to the same basic place. Those other ones will. This just walks you through the different Macs and how to find the different information. So hopefully that helps you for the person that had that question. If you need more on that, please go ahead and put that back into the chat. I'll get you some more information. So again, you as a provider or representative, your primary contact will always be the Medicare administrative contractor. However, there are times when you may need to contact the Benefit Coordination and Recovery Center, or BCRC. You will have limited time so that you can contact them, and there must be very specific information should you do this. Okay. Now, the BCRC's job is to determine who is primary. So it's one of their job responsibilities. They have to do investigations. They have to put all that information into the system. And once they enter it into the system, they must maintain it. That means we process the claim based on what they enter. It doesn't have anything to do with us. So the question is, can a provider contact the BCRC, the Benefit Coordination and Recovery Center, to get the Medicare information primary payer updated? The answer is a twofold answer. So first, primary payer information can be updated by one provider one time via phone when the patient passes away. So that is a one-time update that can be done. If not, then the provider can contact them. They can initiate an investigation. They can look into the system. But in order to get the updates made, the provider must send something in writing from the primary insurance. It must identify the primary insurance based on their letterhead. Along with that, it's not just about identifying the primary insurance. It must give us effective and termination dates that need to be added to the system. The BCRC can take that information and update it. If you want to look at a hierarchy on who they investigate from, questions they ask from, they always start with the patient. It's the patient's primary payer information. They'll then move to patient family members or other representatives who owns the insurance, right? It's through my employment plan, therefore I can talk about that one. They could move through the plan itself. They can go through the plan itself. So if a plan sends us something saying this isn't right, can you update this? They will do that. We at the MAC will not, but they will do that. So there's a variety of different factors that come into it, but really the last or bottom person that can do that is the provider community, and you must have something in writing. I was asked why that is, and the answer comes down to the fact that it didn't used to be that way. When Medicare first started and there was primary payer, which first came into the Social Security Act and all those different things, and as it has expanded, providers were allowed to update this by a phone call. And what happened is some providers just would randomly call in and say, hey, can you update this? Okay. We would update it. Another provider would call in and add it on. Another provider would call in and take it off. And it created a lot of back and forth work, overpayments, things like that. Keep in mind, once the system is updated to show there is a primary payer, all claims will stop paying, and claims that are within that time frame. So if there's no effective date, we can go back for as long as the Medicare record exists, but claims within the time frame, if we do have an effective date, will automatically be sent for overpayment. It's not something that we actually have to do anything with. The system generates it, sends it out. So you can imagine the back and forth of canceling those and reissuing those and the things like that. That's what wound up happening and why the BCRC came into play in the first place. Their job is also to be a recovery center, and they work with non-group health plans. So liability, no fault workers' compensation, all of those. If something happens and there's a legal, you may have been paid, right? You may have said to Medicare, go ahead and pay me, make a conditional payment. That's a whole separate class, by the way. Conditional payment is not part of this. But they will then work towards those other insurances getting money back. That's part of the benefit coordination and recovery center. That's why their name is as it is written. They do not necessarily work with the provider community. So if a recovery needed to come from the provider community and an update were to go through, what would happen is they would notify the MAC via the common working file to take the money back. It has nothing to do with them. They don't actually contact you. Now, if something happens and they need information from you or something like that, they could potentially contact you in that way. But I will tell you, very rarely will that happen. The BCRC really works with the patients to get that information. I just don't want you to think it could never happen. We all know that anything's possible in Medicare. Hopefully you're aware of that. I will tell you if you want to learn more, please go ahead and visit the coordination of benefits and recovery section of the CMS website. It is a really good set of information for you. I'm going to have Leanne throw that into chat. I just think it's a great opportunity for you guys to get more information. All right, the next contractor, which is actually part of the MSP contractors, is called the Commercial Repayment Center. Now, the Commercial Repayment Center does not work to update records. What happens is the Commercial Repayment Center works with the Benefit Coordination and Recovery Center, or the BCRC. So the CRC works with the BCRC. You guys get that one? But what the CRC does is once it's determined that there is a primary payer and it is a group health plan, they work to look at the claims that need to be recovered, whether the recovery is from the group health plan, whether they need to contact the MAC and have the MAC take money back from the providers, whether some of it was paid to a patient and should that be a patient liability, what's going on with that type of insurance. So they have a different type of job. Remember that BCRC works with the non-employment base and the CRC solely works with the employment-based plans. Typically, you won't work a lot with the CRC. If they determine that something needs to be done, including an overpayment, they contact your Medicare Administrative Contractor, which is why we put them first. And that Medicare Administrative Contractor sets those overpayments up. We then contact the provider community. If you disagree with it, you will file an appeal, whether it's the CRC, the BCRC, or the MAC. You will file a typical appeal, and I'll talk more about that on the overpayment. And there was a couple of questions that came in, so we'll get to that in just a few more moments. The last one that's really important is 1-800-Medicare. Now, you said this isn't as important to me as a provider. I don't contact 1-800-Medicare, and that is absolutely correct. Your patient or the Medicare beneficiary does contact 1-800-Medicare. This is where they go to get questions, but this is also a separate website. And I just want to show you this website as well. Again, kind of going back and forth. Let me pop this up. So you guys are going to be on cms.gov is the start of this. You can see right here, cms.gov. This is the provider and contractors website for Medicare. Provider and contractors. Now, someone said, is it just Medicare alone? No, it's anything under the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. But unlike this website, there is one for the patient, and it's medicare.gov. This is where the patient can actually log into a secure piece of information. They can get, their remit notices and their summary notices, not a remit notice, and that'll come into play in just a few moments in the next set of questions. So they can get all of this information off of here as well. If you look under basics and you look under some of the different resources, you see Medicare New Handbook. I love this handbook because it's what the patient gets each year. So similar to our insurance policy plans where we actually get a full list of what's going on, and then each year we get updates to that. Whether we get them electronically or in paper, that's what happens. Now Medicare does this in paper each year, and that's what the Medicare New Handbook is. But also, I like this, the forms and publications. As someone that, goes out and talks to someone, you might want this. As someone who's looking for something that might help you explain something related to Medicare Secondary Payer and when to contact who, take a look at these publications. The forms are good, but the publications is the middle one. And inside there, go ahead and select any of the ones you want. You can select a category if you want. You can leave it alone. You can put, I use the word secondary. Try to stay away from the word Medicare, because as we all know, Medicare is a big old term that's used a lot. So I try to use the word secondary, and then it just explains how Medicare works with other insurance. It's a great little booklet. Kind of gives the patient some information. The reason that I'm encouraging you to look at this booklet versus CMS.gov, this one's written at a lower grade level to help the patient understand. So while you could come out, and I'm just going to contrast, this is one, the provider booklet for this is going to be in training and education on CMS.gov. So again, provider booklet, CMS.gov, patient booklet, Medicare.gov. When we open training and education, we'll go to Medicare Learning Network, resources and training. And there we go. Sorry. Go to articles or publications, just depends on what you're looking for. I'm going to use publications in this case. And here again, I'm going to say, oh, what am I looking for? Secondary. There's two fact sheets, or there's a fact sheet and a booklet. We're going to focus on the booklet here, but the fact sheet is there as well. And it will open up. Now, the reason that it opens this page is that if this is updated, they'll tell you all the current updates. So that way, instead of having a bunch of different links there, and then if you go through, you can see the contrast. The provider booklet looks very different, is written at a different level. It has different breakdowns than the patient booklet. Okay. Each one is targeted, and you want to make sure you're getting the correct information. So hopefully that helps understand the two websites and where to refer the patient to, because that was one of their questions, and I wanted to make sure I covered that as thoroughly as I can. So again, 1-800-Medicare is very important. I was asked for some other entities that are definitely involved. And as I said, the appeals process is involved. And so this is where we really just want to take a minute and talk about that. The appeals process is involved if there is an overpayment. So these other contractors and when to contact them is very important. If you are not familiar with the Medicare appeals process, go back to the CMS website, go back to that education portion and look up the booklet. Now, there's a booklet that does cover the education portion, and there's the official original fee-for-service appeals process website, which covers all 5 steps. So things to be aware of. If you get an overpayment request, you have the right to disagree with it by filing an appeal. Okay? An appeal starts at level 1, which is a redetermination done by your Medicare administrative contractor. So that's why there are other entities involved, because if you don't agree with how we determine, you can move to level 2, the qualified independent contractor. If you still don't agree, you can move to the Office of Medicare Hearings and Appeals. The next level is the Medicare Appeals Council, followed by the 5th level as a U.S. District Court decision. And depending on the amount that you owe, you can move through these different levels. But it's important to understand that in terms of Medicare Secondary Payer, you're really not filing a claim appeal. The claim was already handled. Things are done that way. What you are filing is an overpayment appeal. So please, if you get an overpayment, make sure that that is listed properly. If you do not list that properly, the actual overpayment appeal that you're trying to do may be denied for timely filing, saying, no, this claim is too old, even though the overpayment's 30 days old, but the claim is 4 years old. Very important that you do that. Someone else asked if medical review is exempt from MSP claims, and I'm assuming you mean Medicare medical review and the different contractors, and the answer is no. As long as it is a as long as it is a Medicare claim, medical review can occur. This could include the MAC, the Targeted Probe and Educate done by the MAC, but it could also include the Comprehensive Error Rate Testing Program or the Recovery Audit Contractor under the Recovery Audit Program. So it doesn't exclude medical review at all. It could also include those medical review entities that do fraud and abuse investigations. So no, it's not excluded. It doesn't make any difference in terms of that portion of it. Now, remember that when you're looking at medical review and you're talking about Medicare reviews, yes, we would still follow the Medicare guidelines, though MSP would be considered, medical necessity is still in play, all of those other types of things still come into play. So we follow the Medicare guidelines and then we look to the primary payer as well. So it gets even more complex to make sure it was paid correctly if we need to do that coordination. All right. Before I jump into the QA, I do want to jump back to the CMS website for y'all. Remember I said, let's take a look at this website and what should we look at? I'm going to go back to the education, training and education, and we're going to go back to the publications area. Here, instead of secondary, I want to remind everyone that if you are not sure of the appeals process, please make sure that you are aware of this. Okay, the appeals process is level 1 through 5, but I don't want you to skip this top one. The patient has the right to file an appeal on anything, and some of the stuff they appeal and they have rights for, you do not. That does include how we paid after a primary insurance and how we coordinated all of that benefit out. You may not be able to file an appeal, but they will have appeal rights. One of the questions I got in this process was, how is a patient notified of their appeal rights? When it relates to an overpayment, they will receive a letter. So if you're getting the overpayment, they're copied on it. In that letter, it will let them know that they do have the appeal rights. It will also give them certain other things that go with that, just depending on those appeal rights. I'm not sure exactly what you were looking for there, but the patient can be also notified. Patient can also be notified on a Medicare summary notice. This is different than a remittance advice. Though it works very similarly, summary notices are done quarterly, so hopefully this will answer your question regarding this. The patients are notified on a quarterly basis, not on a claim-by-claim basis. So you as a provider can actually get the information to bill them, and then the patient gets it later. Now, the situation that arose in this one was the primary payer applied the claim to deductible. Medicare applied the claim to deductible. Can you bill the patient? Yes. Do you have to wait until the patient receives the Medicare notice? And the answer is no. If you've got it, you can do that. Remember on the Medicare.gov website, I'm like, the patient can go out and look it up. So both have applied to deductible. It is patient liability, right? That's true. You can bill out to the Medicare allowed amount, and the patient does have the right to look this up because they do not receive information as often as you do. So hopefully that answers that question. I'm going to go ahead and advance on, get into a couple pre-submitted questions, and then we'll go back into the chat questions again. So the first pre-submitted question, and I want to cover this one again because I think it's very important, and it was asked quite a few different times. Can MSP information be updated by providers? And the answer is sometimes. Remember that the two scenarios were what? One, if the patient passes away, then only once. One provider, one time can do that via phone. Second, the provider can contact the BCRC with information from the primary insurance on their letterhead. That information must contain the coverage start and stop dates. Okay, that's what we have to have. If it's never been an insurance, they don't have it. It could also just contain a simple statement like that. They've never had this insurance. We don't know who this person is. This is not correct. That would be okay too. So no, a provider cannot always call in and get this updated. They do have to rely on the patient. Which brings me to the next question that was submitted. How do you help the patient resolve these when receiving this type of a denial? So you're getting a denial for primary coverage and the patient's saying, I don't have this. There are a couple of things you can do. One of the easiest, if you have this available to you, is that when the patient is in office with you, or do a three-way call. Contact the BCRC, work with them. If the patient's there and gives you permission for that call, you can work on their behalf. That is fine, that is acceptable. Otherwise, fall back to the advice I just gave you, which says get that letter. Some patients won't do this. They're not going to update it. They're not going to go with this. They've done this. They feel like they've done their job, whatever the situation is. We've all been through that. Please document that as well. We want to make sure we know that. But ultimately, it is the provider's responsibility to get the information to correctly do it. Now, you can also bill an individual claim to the primary insurance that's listed. And for that claim alone, we can take a denial. They're not covered. What we can't do is update the system with that denial. And we can't update the system because it doesn't have the start and stop date. It also doesn't indicate if they've never had that insurance. So really, it's about what is going on and what you have happening. Hopefully I answered that question as thoroughly as I could. I think I got to all the different scenarios. So if you have more information on that, please feel free to put that back in chat. But Leanne, the next thing that I need to know is, do we have any questions in the chat?
Tom, we do not have any questions in the chat at this time.
All right. The next one is just some additional resources and some additional things I think that are important for you to have when you go to contact us. First is the CMS webpage, your responsibilities. Now, I could navigate to all of these and you can find all of these out on the CMS website. I can also tell you if you download any of this information, what will happen is you're just able to select any of the links. So here's one. Oop, or not. There we go. And so you can see it's the coordination of benefits, which is where we were when we were on, or where we have already previously seen, and then it just goes through provider services and it talks about your responsibilities. For those of you that would like me to navigate to this, I'm going to do that in just a second. So, but what this does is it spells out what providers are responsible for. This is what should happen, how you should obtain the information, the MSP questionnaire, all of those different types of things. A lot of the information we actually gave came from this page. Okay. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and scroll back up. Oh, sorry. I did forget to highlight the MSP questionnaire downloadable on the bottom for you. If we open this up, it'll walk through this is just a sample questionnaire. It's not something you have to use, but it'll walk through what Medicare expects you to ask of the patient, because you must determine if each of the non-employer group health plans and the employer group health plan scenarios apply. And so that's what this questionnaire is designed to help you do. I'll talk more about timeframes for questionnaires in just a few moments. But if we scroll back up, a couple of you did ask for me to navigate to things and to actually show you navigation. You can search for your billing responsibilities. That's fine. You could also go to Medicare. Under Medicare, look down this side and you have Medicare and I'm sorry, nope. Look down the side and what you're looking for is coordination. Where is it? Coordination of benefits and recovery. So it's way towards the bottom. Once you open that up, you can go to the overview page or whichever one you want to. This is where you see that provider services page listed directly. But the overview page will also have this available. It's going to be on the left side instead. One of the reasons I wanted to bring you out here is I did have someone ask how they can find the Benefit Coordination and Recovery Center's contact information. It's available to you on the CMS website in the Coordination of Benefits and Recovery area. If you just simply scroll down, you will see contacts on the left side. It's also available on the body in the middle, but I think it's easier on the left side. Select that. It'll walk you through all the different contacts that you need. We re-highlight how to get there. Medicare, scroll down, Coordination of Benefits and Recovery, go to Overview. Go to Overview. Again, here's Provider Services, but we're going to go to Overview. When you want the contact information, scroll down on the left side, select Contacts, and then you just got to scroll through and find out which one you need. Okay. So that should answer hopefully a couple of those types of questions. I do want to remind you again that those 2 Medicare Learning Network articles were out here. Just making sure that you're aware of that when you talk about the secondary payer. Again, I always find it easier to start with secondary. I'm not a big fan of starting with the word Medicare because a lot of things start with Medicare, so I'll use the word secondary when I do my search, but that's up to you. The one that I do want to point out is this one that says don't deny services. We've already looked at the basic overview booklet, but let's look at this one. Again, it's going to work the same way. The reason this is so important is there's an issue going on with some providers right now, and what they're doing is saying we are not going to cover you, we are not going to provide you with services because you have Medicare you have insurance other than Medicare or a payer other than Medicare. That's not a correct action to take. So if you're interested in learning more about that, please take time to read this booklet. One other resource I was asked about was the internet-only manuals, and there's a couple of different things I want to talk about with those. So please keep in mind that the manuals are the day-to-day operating instructions. So CMS instructs contractors and providers in the same place, in the same manner, using the same manuals. And that's what we're going to look at next. So again, cms.gov, go to Medicare, regulations and guidance. And I think this is where the person was getting confused because they kept saying that this isn't where I'm finding my coverage information. Correct. Your basic coverage information would be here, but the manuals, the actual daily operating instructions are under regulations and guidance. The first item on the left-hand column in the blue body is manuals, and that's where we want to go. I want to let you know, first of all, too, this little transmittals down here, it's under related links under the body. This is where the changes occur. So something kind of changed within a manual, but the manual itself hasn't been rewritten or hasn't been updated. The transmittals will give you that. But really, the internet-only manuals are your big one here. I mean, your left side. And then if you scroll down, a couple of them that I want to point out. First, all things Medicare Secondary Payer, well, it's in 100-05, the publication number, and it's Medicare Secondary Payer Manual. So you can read through all kinds of information about Medicare Secondary Payer, including the recovery, all of the different processes, all of that general information. One thing I do not want you to forget, though, is that if you're reading through the Medicare Claims Processing Manual, which is 100-04, please don't forget to scroll down and look at chapters 25 and 26. Now, the reason that we bring these two chapters up is because over 90% of our claims, and it's usually closer to 95 to 98% of our claims, come in electronically. So what happens when you suddenly need to file a paper claim? Where do you get those instructions? And you're like, ooh, I don't know. Sometimes that does happen, and you want to make sure that you're following the claim form instructions. They can slightly differ for all things with MSP related information. So I want to make sure you're aware of that. Appeals information is here. The last one that I just want to point out, we're going to go back up. We're going to go to one more manual set before I let you go on this one, is the Medicare Benefit Policy Manual. This gives you all the basic benefits for Medicare, all the different services all in one, lots of stuff going on. So I do want to make you aware of it. But I want to scroll down in one chapter in particular, the Medicare General Exclusions from Coverage. Okay. If you find something listed inside the general exclusions from coverage, these are things that are never covered by Medicare. You don't need to bill these to Medicare unless the patient asks you to. So for instance, if you're doing an eye exam and you're doing the refraction portion, the refraction's never covered by Medicare. Don't know why the law excludes it, but it is written that way in the law. Therefore, you don't need to bill it to Medicare. This is your exclusions list. And I was specifically asked about things like that. So want to make sure you're just following through on all of this. So if you can cite from the Social Security Act or from other portions of the law, even the Code of Federal Regulations or something that says, hey, this is an interpretation of the Social Security Act, no, that doesn't need to be billed to Medicare unless the patient indicates they want it billed to Medicare or someone following Medicare needs that, which would be another payer. So those are just some different manuals that I think are important that you might want to be aware of. Okay. Next, I would like to move to our website. This should also be on your next slide, just so everyone is kind of aware of where I am right now. Maybe 24, 25-ish, right in that range, but it's WPS Resources. I was specifically asked about a payment calculator. So if I go up to the top on our website, again, wpsgha.com, and I go to All Tools, if I scroll through this, if you look on the left column, I'm sorry, the right column, apparently I can't tell my left from my right, but the right column, third item down, you have MSP calculators. Before I move over, don't go any further. This calculator will help you work to make sure we process claims correctly. It tells you this should only be used in certain circumstances: working age, end-stage renal disease, and disability. So it doesn't apply to all types of claims. What the calculator will do, though, is if you're using it properly, it will tell you how much we pay. So it'll go through the obligated to accept as payment in full, how much the primary paid, all of those different amounts, and you'll be able to fill it out. Please note this does not work for everything. Again, it doesn't work for everything. So make sure you're using this correctly. I think that that was where the confusion was with the payment calculator, is that someone was using it for an incorrect type. I don't know for sure because I don't have that information from you, but that's what we're looking at. Yeah. A couple people asked me about the MSP questions. And so there you go to Topic Center and you would go to claims. I can scroll down and find them under MSP and MSP questions. These were questions that came from a previous set of education that we did. The education was done as part of a collaborative work group with national collaboration, which means all contractors were together and we collaborated to do MSP questions. That's where these questions came from. So if your question isn't in there, I understand that, but you can always ask us additional questions, contact our customer service area if you need additional help, but it may be something that would help you out. The MSP questionnaire one right above it, it's literally just something that's going to walk you through the MSP questionnaire, help you understand a little bit about it. I do think it's great information, but remember when we looked out on the CMS website, there was a sample questionnaire in that provider section, and the sample questionnaire is designed to help you. One of the questions that came in that you will see either in the sample questionnaire or on this is how often do you have to ask these questions? And we'll get to that, but just to kind of give you a little summary here. First, inpatient claims on every admission. Inpatient claim, every admission. Outpatient claim, it varies on who you are as a provider. So if you're an outpatient facility, it's the start of every care. And if it's a known reoccurring service, such as PT, OT, maybe chemo or something done in an outpatient facility setting, and it's billed on a UB04 or 837I, it's the start of every care with 90 days there following. If you bill on a 1500 claim form or an 837P, you must ask these questions as often as necessary to maintain accurate records. That is a very generic language used by CMS because we don't know how often that patient is coming in to see you. WPS encourages you to follow the outpatient standard of every 90 days. But again, that's an encouragement. So just some information you might want to know there. I'm going to scroll back up for just a second here. Points out you can see some different information here, but I also want to point out the very top, this user login area. Now I can't log in, I don't get access to this, but I do want to point out that there is Medicare Secondary Payer in here. This information is updated on a basis. You hit touch, we send it out to CMS. It uses the same transaction that you would have access to. That is the 270, 271 HIPAA standard transaction. So it's done real time. And if you go to the portal user manual, again, you can log in if you need to, but you can always go to the portal user manual. We'll let you know MSP information is under eligibility for the patient. So you want to scroll down until you find what you're looking for, and that's patient and eligibility. If you do the eligibility check, it'll talk to you a lot about the pieces of information you need, and then it'll actually walk you through the steps to do the eligibility check. I was asked about the supplemental information versus eligibility. This is insurance that pays after Medicare, so not what you're looking for. And I think there might have been a bit of confusion for that. If you look in the eligibility section, you'll get your basic patient information, but then you're going to get a series of boxes that looks like this. If you notice a gray box, this means there is no primary payer information. Medicare is not secondary. If it was a blue box like this instead of MSP, then that's where you would want to go. I'm just going to scroll down right quick, so look away if you don't like the fast scroll. My goal is just to show you what information is available. Okay. So look away real quick. I'm just scrolling down to it. It takes me a little bit to get there. All right. So under MSP information, and you can see here's just a section in the same scrolling page, it'll just explain, hey, this is what we have. We have enrollment and termination dates, insurers information, all these different pieces. Someone did ask me, for instance, what happens and why doesn't all this information always populate it? Well, there's a couple of things that happen. One, if it's still under investigation, we may not have the information there. So the BCRC hasn't entered all the information into the system yet. We don't have it to display for you. That's one that happens. Two, if for some reason CMS doesn't send it to us, we can't give it to you. And again, sending it to us occurs on a HIPAA standard transaction 270, 271. So again, just a lot of information you might want to learn about. All right, I'm going to scroll through these slides really quick because we did talk about all of these different things. And that brings us to the last chance for Q&A. I will go ahead and see if we have any questions in the chat, and then if not, we'll do a couple of pre-submitted questions.
And Tom, we do not have any questions in the chat.
All right, so first pre-submitted question is, what is the difference between the ongoing responsibility for medicals or ORM and other liability cases? In this situation, it is really the same thing. How do you know the difference when a patient's in a SNF? You do have to check it. If you go back to that eligibility screen that I showed you on our website, oops, sorry, it didn't open. There we go. ORM indicator is available to you, which is why I wanted to show this to you, but it is going to be there for you. Now, ongoing medical responsibility just means that it continues to go on until the money runs out or until whatever happens. But if you would like more information, there is an area within the Medicare Secondary Payer manuals in Chapter 5. It's section 20.4. I had Leanne throw that into the chat for you as well. That will get you that. The last question we had is, how do you get SNF claims paid for MSP? Not exactly sure what you mean on this. If you're looking for billing information, do check out our MSP YouTube channel, the Encores. We do have a class that talks about MSP billing in general, but we also have a section for SNF billing, so I'm not sure what you need from there. So help me understand a little bit more. You can send that in. How would you send that in? I'll go over that in just a moment. All right, here we go. Certificate of Achievement. You will be receiving an email. It is a follow-up email. Inside that email, there'll be a couple of highlighted things that you might need. One, the survey. We do ask that you take the survey. I'm going to talk about that in a few moments because we really do want your feedback. Two, on the bottom of that automated email, you're going to get a certificate of achievement with contact hours. Your governing body may recognize that for follow-up, or I'm sorry, for CEUs. So you can go ahead and use that if you need to. Follow-up questions. You have 7 days to send us follow-up questions related to today's topic, and we will research them and send them back to you. So again, MSP resources or MSP contacts, whatever you want to do in that, just put that in the topics and email us there. If you put it into us, we'll get it back to you. Surveys, follow-up, help us. So I'm going to have Leanne throw a chat link in for the survey. But also you'll be able to give them the opportunity in a pop-up box. The survey is very key and crucial for us. It does grade WPS as an overall MAC, but then it also grades the individual education. Were the websites useful? Was the way I presented useful? Was it clear, concise? So tell me the good, the bad, and the ugly. Did you like what I had to explain? Did I explain it well? That's the good. The bad. Did I not do good and could have done this better or that better? Let me know. I want to know that. Also, did you like my presentation? That's what I call my ugly. Did you like my presentation? Did you like my resources, the good, the bad, and the ugly? Give me all that information. All right. That's it. So thanks for attending, everyone. Thanks for your time today. I do appreciate that you took the time to attend. We would like you to complete that survey right afterwards. You can do it right now. But remember to review our live events page for more registration. If you have follow-up questions, remember to get those in the next 7 days. On behalf of myself and Leanne, all of Provider Outreach and Education and WPS as a whole, thanks for your participation. We look forward to your survey comments. We look forward to your feedback, and we hope to help you again in the future, and we hope that you attend more future education. You may now disconnect.